Hello everyone. In this video, we're diving into the incredible story of how Hernán Cortés and his 300 followers managed to take over an empire with 10 million warriors. Stick around and let's experience this journey together as history unfolds. That night, the wind howled over the ocean, carrying the salty scent of adventure. In the distance, ships with white sails could be seen, slowly making their way toward an unfamiliar land. The rolling waves seemed to welcome their passengers, men clad in iron armor with eyes full of ambition. They were not mere sailors, they came as conquerors. Across the sea stood a civilization that had never known threats from the outside world. Tenochtitlan, a magnificent city sprawling over a vast lake, was filled with towering structures and bustling markets. Clean paved streets stretched across the land, water channels flowed seamlessly, and at its center stood giant pyramids, witnesses to its glory. From the highest throne, Emperor Montezuma II gazed upon his empire with confidence, unaware that the shadow of destruction had begun to creep in. In the year 1519, the foreign ships finally anchored on the eastern coast of Mexico. From within them emerged explorers clad in gleaming steel armor, wielding weapons that flashed with fire, accompanied by strange four-legged beasts that ran faster than any man, horses. Among them stood a man with piercing eyes filled with ambition. His name was Hernán Cortés. He was not just an explorer, but a leader with a singular goal: to conquer the land of gold and glory. However, before him lay not just any ordinary land. This was the land of warriors, defended by millions of souls loyal to their ruler. How could only 300 men bring down such a grand empire? Was it a victory of sheer strength? Or was it the result of a long-devised deception? This is the beginning of the end of a great civilization, a story that will reveal how the Aztecs fell to the Spaniards, not just through swords and gunpowder, but through cunning strategies, betrayal, and an unavoidable fate. History has begun. From the heights of the main pyramid in Tenochtitlan, the sun bathed the magnificent city in golden light. From above, well-organized streets stretched out, bustling with lively markets and crystal-clear canals. This was no ordinary city. It was the heart of a great civilization built upon blood and sacrifice. For centuries, the Aztecs had forged their empire with an iron grip. They were not merely farmers and traders, but warriors who ruled vast lands across Mexico. Every city under their dominion was required to pay tribute, gold, food, and human lives offered to the gods. To the Aztecs, war was not just a battle, but a sacred duty to maintain the balance of the world. At the pinnacle of the hierarchy stood Emperor Montezuma II, a man believed to be the earthly representative of the gods. Below him, nobles and priests tightly controlled the governance, ensuring the people remained devoted to the temples and the throne. Yet beneath this grandeur, a fire smoldered. The subjugated tribes harbored resentment. They were weary of oppression, sickened by the endless human sacrifices. No one foresaw that these seeds of rebellion would one day become the key to their own downfall. Meanwhile, in the distance, foreign ships loomed ever closer. History was about to change, and blood would soon stain the streets of this once glorious city. The glory of the Aztecs now stood on the brink of destruction. On the eastern horizon, foreign ships finally landed on the shore. The waves lapped gently, as if welcoming uninvited guests. The native inhabitants gathered in the distance, watching anxiously. They had never seen men like these before, pale-skinned, clad in metal, and riding strange four-legged creatures. Among them, a man with piercing eyes stepped forward. Hernán Cortés gazed at this new land with determination. He knew that this was the beginning of something monumental. Behind him, hundreds of armed soldiers followed, their Spanish banners fluttering in the tropical wind. The arrival of the Spaniards was not merely a trading expedition, but a mission of conquest. The natives who watched from afar did not yet realize that within months their world would change forever. Meanwhile, news of the foreigners' arrival quickly reached Emperor Montezuma II in Tenochtitlan. He pondered deeply, trying to determine whether this was an ill omen or the long-awaited return of a god. According to Aztec beliefs, there was a prophecy about the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who was said to one day arrive from the east. Was Cortés the prophesied god? Or was he a threat that would forever alter the fate of the Aztec Empire? The answer to that question would soon be revealed, along with the first blood to be spilled. The footsteps of the Spanish soldiers pressed firmly into the sandy shore. Hernán Cortés stood before his troops, his sharp gaze fixed on the dense jungle stretching ahead. He knew that beyond those trees lay a new world waiting to be conquered, but he also understood that he could not wage war alone. If he was to defeat an empire as vast as the Aztecs, he had to be cunning. With only around 600 men, Cortés realized that brute strength alone was not enough. Politics and betrayal would be far more effective weapons. Shortly after establishing their first camp, envoys from local tribes arrived, curious about the newcomers. Some were fearful, others intrigued. But among them were those who saw an opportunity in the presence of these foreigners. The Tlaxcala, the sworn enemies of the Aztecs, were one such group. Cortés quickly grasped that these tribes lived under the oppressive rule of Montezuma, forced to pay tribute in gold, food, and even human sacrifices to the Aztec gods. Their dissatisfaction was a weakness he could exploit. Thus began Cortés' dark diplomacy. He promised to free them from Aztec domination if they allied with him. Through deception and the lure of victory, he turned the enemies of the Aztecs into allies of his small force. In a short time, his army grew. Now he was not just an explorer, but a war leader. In the distance, atop the Grand Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, Montezuma still gazed anxiously eastward. He had yet to fully comprehend these foreigners, but they moved quickly, too quickly. He did not yet realize that the first step toward his empire's downfall had begun. Deep in the dense forests of Mexico, the sound of war drums echoed, resonating through the towering trees. The Tlaxcala, who had lived for years under the shadow of the Aztecs, now faced a difficult choice: continue resisting the foreign invaders or join them to bring down a far greater enemy. The first battle was inevitable. Tlaxcalan warriors attacked Hernán Cortés' forces, trying to eliminate them before they became a serious threat. However, they quickly realized that these Spaniards were different. Their steel swords cut sharper than obsidian, their armor was nearly impenetrable, and their firearms thundered like lightning, tearing through native ranks. For days they fought, until finally, Tlaxcala's leader, Xicotencatl, realized that resisting the Spaniards would only lead to destruction. With a heavy heart, he extended his hand for peace. Cortés, seeing a golden opportunity, accepted the offer. But this was not merely a treaty. It was the beginning of an alliance that would alter history. The tribal leaders gathered in a solemn ceremony, swearing loyalty to Spain. Cortés, with a sly smile, promised them freedom from Montezuma's rule. Yet in secret, he saw them only as tools. With thousands of Tlaxcalan warriors now at his side, Cortés's forces had transformed from a group of explorers into a formidable war machine threatening the Aztec Empire. Meanwhile, in his palace in Tenochtitlan, Montezuma received the grim news with a pale face. The emperor grew increasingly convinced that the visitors from the east were no ordinary men. But were they truly gods or devils in disguise? With thousands of Tlaxcalan warriors by his side, Hernán Cortés now had the strength to advance toward the heart of the Aztec Empire. They began their march to Tenochtitlan, the magnificent city rising in the middle of a lake, its towering pyramids piercing the sky. This journey was not without obstacles. As they passed through villages still loyal to Montezuma, they were met with hateful glares. Yet many secretly rejoiced, seeing the Spaniards' arrival as a chance to exact revenge on the oppressive Aztecs. Along the way, Cortés continued sending envoys to Montezuma, conveying messages of peace. But deep inside, he knew that peace was only an illusion. Meanwhile, Montezuma found himself trapped in indecision. His people demanded action, yet ancient prophecies foretelling the return of Quetzalcoatl filled him with fear and hesitation. With every step closer to Tenochtitlan, tensions grew. Aztec spies monitored their every move. Cortés realized that despite Montezuma's apparent passivity, the imperial army was preparing. Tenochtitlan might seem calm, but behind its walls, war was brewing. And when they finally reached the city's gates, Cortés could only smile. He had arrived at the threshold of his destiny. This is where one of history's greatest conquests would truly begin. Tenochtitlan greeted the foreign visitors with an eerie silence. Hernán Cortés, astride his horse, marveled at the grandeur of the city rising from the waters. Crystal-clear canals flowed, bustling markets thrived, and towering temples stood as symbols of power. This was no ordinary city. It would not fall easily. Yet Cortés knew victory required more than steel and gunpowder. Politics would be his sharpest weapon, and his first move was to meet the greatest ruler of these lands, Montezuma II. In a palace adorned with gold carvings and jade stones, Montezuma waited. His face was calm, but a storm raged within. Omens had haunted him, erupting volcanoes, mysterious voices in the night, and now the arrival of strangers who resembled gods from ancient prophecy. When the two leaders finally met, Montezuma, to everyone's surprise, stepped down from his throne and bowed before Cortés, offering gifts of gold and jewels. "You are the messenger of Quetzalcoatl," he said, his voice trembling. A fatal mistake had been made. Cortés, concealing his triumph behind a subtle smile, accepted the gifts with open hands, but his heart was already calculating in the next move. Montezuma had made the greatest mistake of his life. By recognizing Cortés as a divine envoy, he had inadvertently given Spain control over Tenochtitlan. However, the Aztec ruler had yet to realize that his own palace would soon become a prison. Cortés moved swiftly. He understood that the Aztec people remained loyal to Montezuma, yet they watched every move of the foreign invaders with suspicion. Without hesitation, he made a shocking decision to imprison Montezuma within his own palace. On a dark night, Spanish soldiers slipped into Montezuma's chambers. There was no resistance. The emperor, once worshipped as a god, was now a captive in his own home. Yet the people of Tenochtitlan were unaware of this. Every day, Montezuma still stood on the palace balcony, speaking to his people, assuring them that all was well. But nothing was well. Cortés now controlled Montezuma like a puppet. Every command that left the emperor's lips was no longer his own will, but a script written by the conqueror. Beyond the palace walls, however, anger was beginning to ignite. The Aztec nobles started to doubt Montezuma. Whispers of rebellion echoed through the streets of Tenochtitlan. They knew that something terrible was unfolding behind the palace's golden walls, and when the people finally learned the truth, blood would flow in the streets. Tensions in Tenochtitlan were reaching a boiling point. The people began to question Montezuma's leadership, seeing him as weak and powerless. They started to realize that their emperor was no longer a ruler, but a puppet under Spanish control. Meanwhile, Cortés felt his position growing more precarious. The once submissive Aztec nobles were beginning to resist. They no longer trusted Montezuma and were devising plans to free the city from the grip of foreign invaders. The breaking point came when a group of Spanish soldiers, acting without direct orders from Cortés, committed an atrocity that shook all of Tenochtitlan. During a religious ceremony at the Great Temple, Spanish forces stormed in and massacred unarmed Aztec priests and warriors. Blood flowed down the temple steps, and cries of outrage echoed throughout the city. News of the massacre spread rapidly. The once hesitant citizens now erupted in fury. They no longer saw the Spanish as guests, but as enemies who had to be destroyed. From behind the gilded bars of his palace, Montezuma heard the cries of his people. He realized one thing: his reign was over, and a great storm was about to arrive. Tenochtitlan was now on the brink of rebellion. The once submissive people had seen the true face of their invaders. Their patience had run out. After the horrifying massacre at the Great Temple, the city erupted in rage. In the streets, stones were hurled at Spanish soldiers. From behind the walls of houses, arrows and spears flew, catching the invaders off guard as they realized they were now trapped in a city that was never theirs. Cortés tried to quell the unrest. He made Montezuma stand on the palace balcony to address his people. The once revered emperor now looked weak and exhausted. With a trembling voice, he pleaded for calm. But the Aztec people no longer wanted to hear more lies. They were no longer Montezuma's subjects. He was no longer their ruler. Shouts of fury filled the air. Suddenly, from the crowd, a stone was thrown, striking Montezuma's face. One stone was followed by another. The emperor, once worshipped as a divine being, collapsed, bleeding, betrayed by his own people. Spanish soldiers dragged Montezuma's dying body back into the palace. He would not last long. And outside, the Aztec people prepared for the greatest battle in their history. Tonight, Tenochtitlan would burn.